poster that came out in Europe, at least in England, I believe, before the movie was released in Europe, said the wave of terror that swept across America. And Kubrick controlled the posters very carefully. Now, it made you do a double take. I remember seeing it in Europe. I was the Rome bureau chief at the time for ABC News, and I remember looking at it and said, the wave of terror that swept across America. What's he talking about? And you'd sort of think that he was talking about the impact of the book The Shining, maybe. The impact of the movie that had just opened over there, maybe. Didn't quite fit. The wave of terror that swept across America from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, was the genocidal armies and the white men with their axe clearing it all and bringing in extractive industries, among many other good things as well. But that was the wave of terror that swept across America, terrifying, of course, the American Indians. I went in to see this movie in Leicester Square, a movie theater right near Leicester Square in London, and I remember it quite clearly. I can even remember the seats we were sitting in. If I went back to the theater, I could point them to you, sort of near the back and over to the left. From the moment of the opening, astonishing helicopter shot, I was terrified. I had no idea what was coming. I remember sort of sitting on the front edge of my theater seat there to keep from falling off. And I remember gripping my belt buckle with my left hand, I think it was. Yes, my left hand, sort of to keep from falling off the edge of the seat and to try to control my terror as I watched this movie. I had no idea what was coming. I hadn't read the book. I'd barely seen any of the posters. And I remember that I was stunned when the movie was over. We left the theater, went down into our underground car park to get into the car to leave. And as we were driving up out of the car park, I was sitting in the back left seat. I was thinking, what was that? What was that? What was it? What was it? What was it? And I think my visual imagination looked at that Calumet baking powder can, the one right behind Halloran's head when he's talking to Danny. I knew what Calumet meant. It meant peace pipe. And I thought to myself, peace pipe, Indians. Oh my goodness, they're all over the place in that movie.
The loser has to keep America clean.
And I suddenly said to my friends, that movie was about the genocide of the American Indians. And they said, what are you talking about? And I started explaining it because I'd noticed the Calumet baking soda can. In the first time we see one, it's a single baking powder can straight on, and you can see the whole word Calumet. So there's no duplicity, like the little girls represent later. This is an honest treaty, an honest peace pipe between them. The other time we see the Calumet baking powder cans is when they're very carefully placed behind Jack Nicholson's head when he's talking to Grady.
Need to rub it in, Mr. Grady. I'll deal with that situation as soon as I get out of here.
There's about 6 or 7 of them stacked up, and they're all turned different ways, and you can't read any one of them completely. I've always interpreted those as being broken, dishonest peace pipe treaties. These two guys, Grady and Jack, are not being honest with each other. Grady is trying to get Jack to go kill his family and commit genocide in the larger sense of the movie. Kubrick often, in many of his movies, he will end them with a puzzle so that he forces you to go out of the theater saying, what was that about? And he would put things in the scenes that he knows will be, among other things, like confirmers when people start to try to figure out what the movie's about. And we know he took this kind of care. There's a photograph in one of the books that actually shows Kubrick carefully arranging objects on the shelves in that dry goods room. I thought afterwards, how come I saw this and a lot of other people didn't? And I've thought about it. It's a combination of factors. First, I grew up in Chicago and therefore just north of the Calumet Harbor, and spent summers up in the sand dunes of Michigan, around on the other side of Lake Michigan. My father took me and my sister out to collect little bits of Indian pottery. I'd already covered at that point in 1980 5 years of the Lebanese Civil War. I was at that point covering John Paul II. I was the Rome bureau chief, and listening to what he was saying about because he experienced the Holocaust at its epicenter and also other horrors. And so all of those factors were very much alive in my mind when we went to see The Shining, which I just thought was going to be some kind of horror movie by this great movie maker. And all of those coming together, along with the little key, the Calumet baking soda can, is why I just happened to twig to it that as we were driving up out of that underground parking garage just off Leicester Square.
I first saw the movie in 1980 when it first came out, and saw it probably 2 times. I can say that I remember the skier poster. That is one thing that really stuck with me. And the window in the office, that's another thing that really stuck with me. And I remember, in the newspapers afterwards, people being disappointed. And I remember people that I knew, yes, in dialogue afterwards, being disappointed that it was not more a horror film. Well, no Kubrick film is really just a regular movie. I understood that from, when I was 10 years old and I first saw 2001. I walked away, I thought, this is a film that's supposed to make me think.
I had my first religious experience seeing the film 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968. I was a smart kid and liked art, but I really did not like movies and thought that they were really a substandard art. And, films like My Fair Lady and Dr. Dolittle were out, and it was a rather pathetic time in the 60s for films. And my girlfriend, she pulled up and told me that she'd seen a movie the night before, and she wanted to see it again. So she took me to the theater, the Cinerama Dome, and I watched it. And I had never in my life envisioned that a movie could do what this movie was doing. And it was showing me things that I'd never seen, and it was intellectually challenging, and it was an artistic masterpiece in every way, from the soundtrack to the visuals to the storyline. And when the movie ended, I couldn't get out of my seat. I was frozen in the seat, completely paralyzed by what I just witnessed. And the usher actually had to come and get me out. And I was the last person, me and her, and I staggered out of the theater, completely changed as a human being, and decided at that moment that the only thing I wanted to do for the rest of my life was to make films in one fashion or another. And so I have done that. So I owe Stanley Kubrick and his film 2001: Space Odyssey everything for everything that I have become in my life. So.
I saw a number of Kubrick films before I had an academic interest in him, and then I went to see The Shining in 1980, and frankly I didn't think that much of it. I thought the other Kubrick films that I'd seen were far superior, but as I thought about the film afterwards, and even when I wasn't thinking about it, there were things that bothered me about it. It seemed as if I had missed something. And so I went back to see it again, and I began to see patterns and details that I hadn't noticed before. And so I kept watching the film again and again and again. And since I'm trained as an historian, and my special expertise is in the history of Germany, and Nazi Germany in particular, I became more and more convinced that there is in this film a deeply laid subtext that takes on the Holocaust. I think it probably was the typewriter, which was a German brand, which might seem arbitrary, but by that time I knew enough about Kubrick that most anything in his films can't be regarded as arbitrary, that anything, especially objects and colors and music and anything else, probably have some intentional as well as unintentional meaning to them. And so that struck me, why a German typewriter? And in connection with that, I began to see the number 42 appear in the film. And for a German historian, if you put the number 42 and a German typewriter together, you get the Holocaust, because it was in 1942 that the Nazis made the decision to go ahead and exterminate all the Jews they could, and they did so in a highly mechanical, industrial, and bureaucratic way. And so the juxtaposition of the number 42 and the typewriter was really where it started for me in terms of the historical content of the film. Of course, Adler in German means eagle, and eagle, of course, is a symbol of Nazi Germany. It's also a symbol of the United States, and Kubrick generally has recourse to eagles to symbolize state power. Kubrick read Raoul Hilberg's The Destruction of the European Jews, and Hilberg's major theme in there is that he focuses on the apparatus of killing, and he emphasizes how bureaucratic it was and how it was a matter of lists and typewriters. Spielberg picked that up in Schindler's List, of course. I mean, the film begins with typewriters and lists and ends with a list, of course. And so that informs, and I had a chance to talk to Raoul Hilberg. He visited Albion College, and he said that he and Kubrick corresponded about this. And the fact that he read it then, in the 1970s, when there was a big wave of interest in Hitler and the Holocaust and the Nazis, I think just tells us that that typewriter, that German typewriter, which, by the way, changes color in the course of the film, which typewriters don't generally do, is terribly, terribly important as a referent to that particular historical event.
I worked in a film archive for a decade, kind of like fast-forwarding through World War II 10 times a day. But, you know, like, when you see things over and over and over again, their meanings change for you. Like, when you see like World War II newsreels, like, after a while, you come to realize that it's all faked. Like, that you are not seeing troops storming Normandy. You're seeing troops storming a beach in Hollywood. You know, like, you're not seeing a plane flying to Japan. Like, you're seeing a plane flying over, you know, New Mexico. What you're really being shown is, like, staged heroism, you know? Like, you're seeing men moving with machines, but you're not seeing what they're talking about. And I think that's something that Kubrick plays on. Like, he plays on your acceptance of visual information, and also your ignorance of visual information. Like, he'll often, like, put little special clues that you see, like, in the corner. Every scene there's an impossibility. Like the TV doesn't have a cord. Even something simple as, like, they bring too much luggage up. Jack glances over at a pile of their luggage that they brought, and it's about the size of a car. I mean, a lot of it is jokes. Like, they're taking the tour, they're crossing the street from the maze to go check out the garage. Like, a car is just about to hit them. And then it cuts right before. You know?
I had anticipated the film and had read the Stephen King novel before the film came out, found it a very appealing story. And I had spent a lot of time at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which is where he was inspired to write the book The Shining. And so I knew a little bit of the background. And when Kubrick's film came out, I was first in line to see it, of course, and I was just really disappointed, and walked out of the theater wondering what the hell I had just witnessed. And actually, my reverence for Stanley Kubrick diminished after that. I was disappointed, but I still watched it every few years, and I couldn't understand why I was so attracted to watching a film that I actually didn't like. And now, all these years later, I know why it is a great film. It is a masterpiece, but not for the reasons that most people think. We are dealing with a guy who has a 200 IQ. I believe that when Stanley Kubrick finished with Barry Lyndon, he was bored. He had conquered the filmmaking landscape. He had succeeded in making masterpiece after masterpiece, and he was bored. Barry Lyndon is a boring movie. It is wonderfully shot. It is beautifully costumed, but it is a film made by a guy who's bored. And I could see that. And so I think Stanley retreated after Barry Lyndon, and he began working on a new kind of film, a film that had never been made before, a film that was made by a bored genius who had thoroughly emptied the jug of everything that could be done in filmmaking, and he was looking for the next thing. And what he did was he began reading Subliminal Seduction and a number of other books which were about how advertisers were injecting images, subliminal images, into advertising to sell products more.
Suggestible trance. Work new way.
It'll be an ad for Gilby's gin, and inside the ice cubes will be various sex organs and things to add a subliminal appeal to the ad. Kubrick went to these advertisers and he asked them what their methods were. And then he took those methods and he applied them to The Shining. Inside The Shining are hundreds of subliminal images and shot lineups. And what these images are telling is a extremely disturbing story about sexuality. And the subtext of the story, besides the other subtexts of the story, is a story of haunted phantoms and demons who are sexually attracted to humans and are feeding off of them. You'd have to be able to be a complete fanatic like I am in order to find all this, but I'll give you my favorite. I'm only going to give you one, but I'll give you my favorite. When Jack meets Stuart Ullman in the office at the very beginning of the movie, and he reaches over to shake Jack Nicholson's hand. And so step through that scene frame by frame, and the moment, the frame that he and Jack Nicholson touch hands, and right after the line that Barry Nelson says, which is "nice to see you," you can see that there's a paper tray on the desk, and as soon as they touch hands, the paper tray turns into a very large, straight-on, hard-on coming out of Barry Nelson. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's a joke, a very serious joke, but a joke by Stanley. And there's many of these in the film. and very disturbing, some of them. And this will all be in my film Kubrick the Magician. I'll give you one more. This one's harder to find, okay? And you have to know what Stanley Kubrick looked like during the making of The Shining to know this one. But if you go to the opening credits and you pan the frame, you go through the frames right after it says directed by Stanley Kubrick. As soon as his name passes off the frame, stop, and you will see that the clouds have Stanley Kubrick airbrushed into them, his face, with the beard and the wild hair and the whole thing. I know this one's a little harder to find, and I will have to Photoshop this one to show people it, but there is definitely a photograph of Stanley Kubrick in one frame, airbrushed in to the clouds.
In most films, a dissolve is used to indicate a long passage of time between two scenes. But in The Shining, the dissolves go on for so long that they create a superimposition where different scenes seem to be interacting with each other. For example,
you have the exterior, then a tracking shot of the lobby of the camera moving along the western wall toward south towards the entrance, and you see a janitor mopping the floor, but it looks like he's a giant mopping clearing the forest, because he's mopping like a vacant area in the forest. And then the ladder lines up with the pyramid form of the exterior of the hotel, which in the exterior set disappears. Like we only see that in the Timberline exteriors, but the England movie set exteriors of the hotel, like the pyramid is missing. And it seems as if the hotel then takes both sides of the Timberline hotel and then kind of like makes a composite of them. So it's a perceptual shift of making people look like giants, also making the hotel look larger or smaller than it is. I mean, these things kind of litter the movie. But then the shot goes on. We see a janitor pushing a folded up bed on wheels, and then he's followed by another guy who's carrying one coffee table, and then another guy is carrying one chair. Like, what? Where are these guys going with these light loads? Then we see Jack sitting on a chair eating lunch, and the manager and his assistant crosses paths with two women and just as you see in the corner of the screen, you just see it for a second. You see one of the women is wearing a number 13 jersey. Can you hear that, my boy yelling? Hold on one second. I'm gonna see if I can see if I can calm him down. So he's leaning back and eating a sandwich, and he's got a magazine in his lap, and as he stands up to greet them, he throws it down, and if you look at it close up, it's a actual Playgirl magazine. A Playgirl magazine in the lobby of a hotel right in front of his boss, on his first day of work. It's yeah. The cover is like people getting ready for New Year's. There's an article about incest. And at the beginning of the film, Danny's been physically abused, but there's a suggestion that he's been sexually abused as well. So just in that one shot, there's all these complex things going on in the background, like things that are choreographed to match up exactly. Like we see a guy carrying a entering the room carrying a rug, and by the time the scene is just ending, we see him walking up the stairs, like he's crossed the entire place. Timed exactly. I don't know. Yeah.
When Holman is leading the Torrances out of the elevator and into the Colorado Lounge for the first time, there's a pile of suitcases, and in the dissolve into that scene, the scene before, a group of tourists are standing in the lobby, and those tourists dissolve into the suitcases. Now, as an historian of the Holocaust, I find that very, very striking, and certainly not accidental, because he's using those sort of cross dissolves. That could be, along with the latter, where he's trying to make substantive connections as well as formal ones.
Oh, the window in Ullman's office, it is absolutely beautiful. The casual viewer isn't going to see so many things in Kubrick's film, although I think they may register unconsciously, but they're not going to, perceive perhaps these things because, as I've said, he presents them as being real. It's realism, and it's not your typical horror. You don't have horror film except for this one section at the end, right, where Wendy walks in and the lobby is blue, and you've got the cobwebs all around, and it's almost like a Saturday morning kind of horror film suddenly for a second. You kind of go, ooh, what is this, with the skeletons and the cobwebs, and it's kind of cheesy. But then after that, following that, you've got her going down the red hallway, which is on the big screen. That's petrifying. So I think the kind of cheesiness before it helps set up that red hallway. So anyway, what was I saying? Right, the windows. So you've got Jack has entered, and you can see. Kubrick shows you, but he shows you this lobby, and you get to see, as Jack moves across the lobby, you see the elevator beyond, and you see beyond that a hallway. You don't see yet how far back it goes, the other things back there, but you have an impression that this place is towards the middle of the hotel. You just have that impression that it's toward the middle of the hotel. And you go from the lobby into the general manager's office and then into Ullman's office, and there's this window. And the window is a powerful window. I mean, the light coming through there is glaring. It's like a character in itself. It takes over, and you've got these tendrily sinister kind of trees that are outside the window, and you've got, it's just such a forceful presence, this light that comes over everything, and there's something wrong with it. There's something wrong with it, and I think it registers as something wrong. This is an impossible window. It's not. It is impossible. It is physically impossible. It cannot be there. It should not be there. There's no place in the hotel for this window to exist. It's only finally towards the end of the film that you have the realization that there are several hallways in succession behind the office. You see it when Wendy, when she's later down there and she sees DeColloran's body after he has been killed. You have her in that hallway behind the office. So really, no, what can I tell you about the maps? No, I did not sit down with graph paper. I did not even begin to attempt to do them to scale. Let me see, I can't say which room I started off with, I don't remember. And just went through and decided I was going to try to do as much as I could, feeling that I felt eventually that there were places that I could plot out, such as where the girls were killed. I was not absolutely sure at that point when I started out doing the maps where the girls were killed, but I felt that it was somewhere back around the area where they lived. Suite number, what? They live at suite number 3.
When Jack is sitting typing at his typewriter, and Wendy comes in and interrupts him while he's working. And in one shot of Jack
Get a lot written today?
sitting at the typewriter, a one shot, you look back behind him, and of course you can see very clearly, because Kubrick was the master of depth of field. He kept everything in focus, so he would have lots of space in which to put things that he wanted you to notice. And in the first shot behind Jack sitting at his typewriter, back against a wall behind him, probably 10 or 12 or 15 feet, is a chair. And then there's a switch to a one shot of Wendy saying something.
Hey, weather forecast said it's going to snow tonight.
And then the camera switches back to Jack, and the chair is gone.
What do you want me to do about it?
And my students and I always have fun with that, saying, well, continuity error? Could be. Or it's not. And the answer, if it's not, or if it was originally and then Kubrick saw it and decided to keep it, is that he's parodying horror films in order to remind you that this isn't just a horror film. And there's another one in The Shining that's, I think, less well noticed, and I think it's even more clearly substantive. When Danny has his first vision of the elevator gushing blood, and the camera is tracking toward him past the open door of his bedroom and toward the hall and the bathroom, open bathroom door across the hall. And his bedroom door, as you would expect, a kid's door, has lots of cartoon characters on it. And the one who is most apparent, because it's right at the edge of the door, and it's the largest one that you can see, and it's the last one you can see as the camera moves past it, is one of the 7 dwarfs, and it happens to be Dopey. Okay. Subsequently, after Danny has passed out, Wendy and the pediatrician leave Danny's room, and as they do, they of course go out his door, and you again see the door, the open door with all the cartoon characters on it, and Dopey isn't there. Now, again, continuity error? I don't think so. I think what Kubrick is saying is that before, Danny had no idea about the world, and now he knows. He's no longer a dope about things. He has been enlightened.
Anything you say, Lloyd. Anything you say.
The Advocaat is spilled. There's the accident. Kubrick is setting it up. It's where they come around in a circle, because I feel like that's what the camera does. I feel like the camera brings us around in a circle so that we're coming back where the bathroom seems to be overlaying the gold room, and so that the Advocaat situation in the bathroom is occurring about in the same area that it did in the gold room.
They use the camera to create an emotional architecture in your mind, but at the same time showing you that it's false. The set is so completely plastic that its contradictions pile up in your subconsciousness.
Halloran is showing Wendy, the place where she will, basically entrap Jack. Entrap him both physically, but also that will be the last straw for the management of the hotel, and it's in the storeroom that he finally is like, okay, now I'm gonna do it. And the opening of that door is the famous only thing that supernatural happens in the movie that can't be explained any other way. Yeah. But except it can be explained another way, and that Danny lets him know.
I do have this idea that Danny is a lot more consciously murdering his father than the narrative lets on.
know, it's weird. Like, you notice how, like, Wendy's walking backwards when she's having that confrontation with Jack in the lounge, you know, and she's being drawn up to the hexagonal hallway room. And you see Danny shining at the beginning of that. You know, like he's in his room and there's like lights flickering in his eyes. Like, is Danny drawing his mother up the stairs so that she can, you know, sacrifice Jack on top of that, you know, weird pyramid?
When I had a chance, when I was doing a story out in Denver, we went up to Estes Park. It was in the off season. Went into the Stanley Hotel, and I asked to see the manager, and he came out, and we were just having lunch with him, and I said, "Could we talk to you? I write about the Shining," and he said, "Oh, really?" This fellow told me that he got a phone call from Stanley Kubrick, who said, I think I want to make a movie about the Shining, and then he would keep this fellow on the phone for a long time. He said we had many long conversations in which he picked my brain about everything. And at that point, he said Kubrick was talking about maybe coming here to make the movie here, which I expect at that point that fellow liked the idea of, so it would make his hotel famous. And Kubrick said, "I'd like to send out a research team." And so he then sent out, the man said it was something like 2 or 3 people who came out here and stayed here for 2 or 3 months, taking photographs everywhere. And they spent a lot of time also down in Denver in the Colorado State Archives, finding out, as I would now expect, the full history of Colorado, which the flag of which plays a part. And the gold rush, the Colorado gold rush, was also a very big event. And there's still a lot of American Indian white people tension in Colorado with Navajos and Arapahoes just to the south. This research team found out absolutely everything about Colorado, about Estes Park, about the Stanley Hotel, about its entire history, took photographs all over the place. 3 months was the impression I have of what he said about how this research team gathered absolutely everything. Kubrick unearthed an enormous amount about the real history of Colorado, where this takes place, because what he has done is found a way to dig into all of the patterns of our civilization, our times, and our cultures, and the things that we don't want to look at. And this movie is very much also about denial of the genocides that we committed, we white folk from Europe committed here. And not that white folks are the only people who do genocide, all humans do, as Kubrick makes clear in this movie. He would research everything and the full history and nature of everything you're going to see in the movie on the screen. And then boil it down until he got the universal human and global patterns that make it so real.
White man's burden, Lloyd, my man. White man's burden. I like you, Lloyd. I always liked you. You were always the best of them. Best goddamn bartender from Timbuktu to Portland, Maine. Or Portland, Oregon, for that matter.
Thank you for saying so.
And what does it mean, Jack saying you always were the best of them? Starting in Timbuktu, Jack, the school teacher, was never in Timbuktu, but Jack, the universal weak male hired by armies to go commit atrocities, has always been there. Now, of course, the word Portland is neat because it means where we landed, or where the British or the Europeans landed. And Portland, Oregon, is where they may have taken off from to go further west. Kubrick is thinking about the implications of everything that exists. You know, the power of the genie is in its confinement, as the great American poet Richard Wilbur said. Boiling it down, 10,000 years in a little lamp, you got to get your act together. But that's the essence of great art. It's like a dream. It's boiled everything down to an emblematic symbol that's got all of life in it. Now, if you'll allow me to make a little bit of a link here. As I've been thinking about this more in recent years, what we now understand to be the nature of what dreams are, it seems to be, the general theory is that it's a way for the brain to boil down all of the previous experiences and then add in that day's experiences as well to see what kind of overall universal patterns there are to be found, so that you can be aware of what the patterns are out there so that your subconscious will be all the more ready to react suddenly when you see something dangerous happen or something important happen that may lead you to a mate or to some food or away from danger. And therefore, the way Kubrick made movies was not unlike the way, according to these current theories, our brains create memories and, for that matter, dreams. That's the ultimate shining that Kubrick does. He is like a mega brain for the planet who is boiling down with all of this extensive research, all of these patterns of our world, and then giving them back to us in a dream of a movie, because movies are like a dream. And that's related to why I think there's a lot of evidence that what Kubrick also gave us in The Shining is a movie about the past. Not just any past. The past. I mean, pastness. It's a movie about how the past impinges. That's what ghosts are. That's what those skittery voices in the opening shot that are following are about. There's two phrases from T.S. Eliot that I often think of when thinking about The Shining. One of them is I think it's both from T.S. Eliot, the nightmare of history. How can we awake from the nightmare of history? And the other is his phrase, T.S. Eliot's phrase, history has many cunning passages. And I think both of those phrases are directly apt for The Shining, in which we see many cunning passages in the maze and in the hotel itself, and in which the past becomes a nightmare, and in which Kubrick shows us how you escape from the nightmare of the past by retracing your steps, as Danny does in that last line, which means acknowledging what happened or learning about the past, and then getting out. Only if you are going to be able to shine and see what the patterns are so you know how to get away from them and avoid them and go for the good things. I mean, The Shining is his movie about how families break down, whether they're an individual family or the larger societal family that tries to break up individual families. And his last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, is the opposite. It's about a family sorely tried, of Bill Harford and his wife and child, that survives all the horrible temptations that are in our DNA.
This is our famous hedge maze. It's a lot of fun, but I wouldn't want to go in there unless I had an hour to spare to find my way out.
I did not look at it again for a number of years until it came out in rental, and then picked it up a couple of times. And you had 3 days in order to watch a rental, and so I can remember watching it over and over again during those 3 days and really taking a good look at it then. And I was able to think, oh, yes, this is what I remember. This is what I thought I saw, and then catching more things. But it wasn't, of course, until DVD came out that I was really able to sit down and take a good look at it as far as just running through it over and over and over again. Kubrick presents these things where it's realistic. You're not supposed to see what's actually going on. You've got Danny, he's in the game room, he turns around. We're supposed to be focused on the two girls there. And then I saw, over on the left, I see the skiing poster. And the thing is that you already have Jack. He's already asked about skiing. Well, why isn't, what about skiing? Isn't the skiing good here in the hotel? And he's already given the story of why it isn't good, why they can't do that. But you've got the skiing poster, and my eye is drawn to it. And I realized that's not a skier. That's a Minotaur. It just leaped out at me. And so that was something that I was able to look at later on VHS and say, yes, I had actually seen a Minotaur there. Where the upper body, you've got this really, overblown physique, very physical physique. And then you've got the suggestion. You have a suggestion of a skiing pole there, but it's not really there. It's just a suggestion of one. And the lower body is positioned the way the legs are. It's like a Minotaur, the build is. And you've actually got a tail there. And so it is a Minotaur. And this is on the opposite side of the door, you have a cowboy on a bucking bronco. So you've got a kind of echo there, where you've got the Minotaur on one side, the bull man, and on the other side you've got the cowboy, the man on the bucking bronco. And this is just following the scene where Ullman has been taking Jack and Wendy through the Colorado Lounge, showing them off the Colorado Lounge. And they go into the hall behind the Colorado Lounge, and what's there but on the wall there is a painting of an American Indian with a buffalo headdress on. And at that point, Ullman is discussing with Wendy, who has stayed there at the hotel. Royalty, the best people, stars have stayed there.
Royalty?
All the best people.
You have Monarch on the bottom, which, keys in with royalty. And you also have this whole idea of the stars. And the Minotaur's name is, Asterius. His name is Asterius, which means starry. So, you've got several things there to do with mythology that fit in. It's very exciting to me. It was, that's a kind of leap up and down moment where you go, oh wow, look at what Kubrick has there. Yeah, the Minotaur lives at the heart of the labyrinth. He's a part of the labyrinth. Labyrinth, at least in the myth, in this particular myth, was built for the Minotaur. The hotel's, it is the labyrinth. And Jack is the Minotaur. You have scenes with him where such as in, the Thursday scene, the snowfall has started. You have Wendy and Danny outside playing, and Jack is inside the Colorado Lounge, and he's looking out at them. His head is tilted down, and his eyes are elevated, they're pointing up, and his eyebrows are drawn up. But he has this expression on his face that he gets progressively throughout the film that is very bull-like. It has a very Minotaur-like expression. It's the same kind of expression that what Kubrick pulls out in other films, such as it was on Private Pyle's face in the Berserker scene in the bathroom in Full Metal Jacket. So it's not specific to this film. There's more Minotaur imagery. There's in Labyrinth imagery, there's the Gold Room. In front of the Gold Room, you have the unwinding hour sign, and that plays in with the labyrinth, where you have Theseus enters into the labyrinth, and he has the thread with him that he ties at the beginning that assists him in going through the labyrinth where he can find his way back out. And so I see the unwinding hour sign as having to do with that thread. For a while there, I was into baseball. And I get very excited with baseball when I'm in baseball. I can be by myself and I will be leaping up and down. And Kubrick is like that for me, where all I have to do is see the Minotaur poster there. And I go, oh my goodness, look at this. Because you're not supposed to see the Minotaur.
Danny is shown riding his big wheel through the hotel 3 times.
The first ride, I think, is about realism. That's Danny is doing a loop around the lounge set. He goes through the service hallway, and then he goes through the lounge, and then he goes back into the service hallway. And when you first see the movie, you're like, she's just wandering around. It's crazy. It's just, but it's just a very simple loop. He does it once. But that gives you an idea of what that place is. It's, all right, you understand that set is real, like it's a continuous shot, there are no tricks. In the second ride, in the hexagonal hallway, there are more tricks. Like he doesn't do a loop, he does kind of like a key-shaped, or a P-shaped loop around this hallway, and you see the realism of the connection to the lounge set. But you also see the fakery of the fake elevators. And you see, for just 1 second, you see the big stained glass windows out of the corner, and in the corner of the frame, right before he takes a turn around the elevator. And like that's incredible, because like that connects that whole hallway to the giant Colorado lounge set. That's just for 1 second. They didn't have to do that, But it's a metaphor, because he's also elevated. He's one level up from where he was before. Like he starts in the same place, just one floor up. In the northeast corner of the set. So now he's in the northeast corner of one level up. And if you take it as a metaphor of like going from a mundane reality to up into your head, to more of a fantastical reality. The third one is even stranger, because he starts off in the service, starts off in the same northeast corner of the lobby service hallway, and then he takes a turn, and suddenly he's upstairs in the area outside outside their apartment. So like, it's a kind of a combination of the first two, where like he's down low and then he's up high, and then he takes a turn and he's in that yellow and blue wallpaper. Let's say that's in the service hallway area. He's right outside his parents' bedroom. So there's this connection between him going on these big wheel rides and dreaming. Like, he's near his bedroom. Like, you see his parents are working downstairs, but he's upstairs. Like, you see his mom on the telephone, and then he's flying away. He goes above her to the bedroom, which is above where she's working. And just as the hexagonal hallway is above where his dad is working. So these big wheel rides become like a visionary way of Danny to explore his parents' headspace. Like room 237 is that's his father's fantasy chamber, where like he gets it on with the witches. And the twins are like his mother's fantasy headspace, where like they're these double blue women who want to play with Danny forever and ever.
We're all gonna have a real good time.
My interpretation of The Shining is that there's many levels to this film. This is like three-dimensional chess, and he's trying to tell us several stories that appear to be separate but actually are not. And he's doing this both through the overt script that he wrote. He's telling it through tricks of the trade, the subliminal imagery, and these constant retakes giving him odd angles and things. And he's also telling you through the changes that he made to the Stephen King novel. So if you watch those three things, you begin to understand this deeper story. And this deeper story has its birth, I guess, in the idea that Stanley Kubrick was involved with faking the Apollo moon landings. In fact, I contend that 2001: A Space Odyssey, in part, was a research and development project for the Apollo footage that was shot. I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. I'm just saying that what we saw was faked, and that it was faked by Stanley Kubrick. And I've had Hollywood special effects people from the 60s and 70s who were front screen projection experts tell me that I absolutely have nailed the Apollo footage as being the result of front screen projection. Just go to any Apollo site and look, and you'll see that they have to hide the bottom of the screen, and you can always see the set screen separation line in every Apollo footage, every Apollo image, and the video footage that has a background. And Richard Hoagland, the researcher, has looked into the Apollo imagery, and he has found all sorts of problems with it, because in the sky around the astronauts, he's found reflecting lights and refracting things and kind of a junk and geometry and things that are in the sky, and he concluded, wrongly, that there are gigantic alien cities made out of glass. What he's really seeing is the reflections of light off the tiny beads on the Scotch-Light screen, which is being used in the front screen projection process. And so once I nailed the front screen projection process inside the Apollo footage, then I became interested in seeing if Kubrick left any clues in the rest of his career to his possible involvement in faking the Apollo moon footage, and I was overjoyed about 2 years ago when I received my Blu-ray copy of The Shining, and I put it in my Blu-ray machine and sat down one night to watch it, and I realized that all of the things that one could imagine that Stanley Kubrick would have had to go through to fake the Apollo moon footage. And there in the movie, every time that Stanley deviated from the Stephen King novel, he deviated into those exact questions. You know, what was it like to make a deal with the U.S. government? What was it like to accidentally tell someone what you were doing and to watch them possibly have to suffer the consequences of your lack of integrity? What was it like to lie to your wife and tell her that you were doing one thing when you were doing another? What was it like when your wife found out what you were really doing? These are the questions that I had long before I'd seen The Shining again after maybe an 8 or 9 year absence. And I wasn't sure I was right for the first hour. I wasn't sure that I had actually... I wasn't sure if I was blurring the line between what I wanted to see and what I was seeing. And then at about 58 minutes in the film is the famous scene where Danny's playing with his trucks and he stands up and he's wearing the Apollo 11 sweater with a rocket taking off. Then I knew I had nabbed it. And then I started watching the film with an intensity that I don't think I've ever watched a movie before. And every line began ringing true. Wendy, that is just so typical of you. Don't you know I have obligations to my employers? Do you have any idea what a contract is? Do you know what an agreement is? Jack Nicholson's whole tirade against his wife, that's Stanley. That's Stanley telling his wife that, after she discovered what he was doing, which was the Apollo footage. No, that's actually not true. If you call the Mount Hood Resort and you ask for room 217, you will find there is no such room. So that's just not true. That statement's not true. And so Stanley was lying. It's not the reason that he changed the room number from 217 to 237. The reason that he changed it from 217 to 237 was because the room 237 in the film represents the moon landing stage where he worked. And the moon, the standard science textbooks said, and they still say, but now with lasers we've gotten a little better reading, but is that the mean distance of the moon from the Earth is exactly 237,000 miles. So he changed that so that you would understand that this was the moon room. So Danny stands up. He's got the Apollo 11 sweater on. He begins walking down the hallway towards room 237, and there's a key in the lock, and on the key is the words room and then the word NO, which is an old acronym for number, so room number 237, except that the only capital letters on the key are ROOM and then the N from the acronym NO. And if there's only two words that you can come up with that have those letters in them, and that's moon and room. And so on the key, the tag, it says moon room. And that is the moon room. This is where everything happens, and none of it's real. And it all has to be lied about. And we can't let anyone know what's really going on in room 237. And there's many, many other deviations from the book to the movie.
It isn't real.
the deviations drove Stephen King out of his mind. He just ranted and ranted for years how much he hated The Shining, and he hated it because he'd given Kubrick all this great source material, and Kubrick threw it out. And the whole idea of this is best exemplified by the scene where Dick Halloran is driving up the highway trying to get to the Overlook during a winter storm, and he passes a wreck, and in the wreck a semi has crashed and crushed a red Volkswagen. And this is a direct message from Kubrick to King, because in the novel Jack Torrance's car is a red Volkswagen, but in the movie it's a yellow Volkswagen. And what Kubrick is saying in that scene is a big F-U to Stephen King. He's saying, this is my vehicle, I have wrecked your vehicle, and everybody in the world can see it. And this drove King crazy, and it should have. But what was really going on, and what is just much more deliciously fascinating about all of this, is that in fact Kubrick was faking the making of the Stephen King novel in order to reveal the idea of what he went through to do the Apollo moon footage.
My argument as far as Kubrick goes is that he was a preternaturally observant child. He read omnivorously, he went to movies all the time, and I think if you're going to movies and reading in the 1930s and 1940s, a lot of what you're seeing and reading is Hitler and the Nazis and the war. So, as a sensitive kid, he must have been alive to these things, and I don't think he ever forgot anything. And which is why his films are so rich.
Little pigs, let me come in. Not by the hair on your chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in.
Well, the Three Little Pigs, I mean, I don't remember. That might have been one of the things that Jack Nicholson might have ad-libbed initially. Kubrick was a great believer in that. But even if it was, I think the selection of that particular little rhyme certainly fits in with the time periodization I've just been talking about, because Kubrick would have run across that when he saw The Three Little Pigs as an Academy Award-winning cartoon in 1933. And so it comes out of that period. And so the whole idea of a wolf, which during the 1930s gradually transformed itself in popular mythology and popular culture from being a symbol of want and of hunger in the Great Depression into a symbol of enemies, enemy nations, enemy peoples, military aggression. And of course, this reflects the rise of fascism and Nazism in Europe. But initially, the wolf at the door was an anti-Semitic stereotype and caricature. That initially, the wolf wears a disguise, and the background music is clearly Eastern European sort of klezmer or Yiddish music, and it's a classic example of early 1930s Walt Disney anti-Semitism. So I think there are layers of meaning in The Three Little Pigs, and since Kubrick was a Freudian, and we know that he used a Freudian work in doing the screenplay for The Shining, Bruno Bettelheim's, the uses of enchantment, and it's a Freudian analysis of the meaning of fairy tales. And in The Shining, we can see the fruits of that when they're constantly making reference to Hansel and Gretel.
I feel like I'll have to leave a trail of breadcrumbs every time I come in.
And the witch in the oven and children being burned and so forth, which of course is also perhaps suggestive when it comes to the Holocaust.
The blood is one of the main ghosts, and perhaps the overarching ghost in a certain sense in this movie. We first see it when Danny, at the beginning of the movie, is at the sink in the little apartment down in Denver or Boulder, wherever it is, And he's talking to Danny, why didn't you want to go there? And then suddenly Danny shows him blood. And as we learn a little bit later, the Overlook was built on the Indian burial ground between 1907 and 1909.
It started in 1907. It's finished in 1909. The site is supposed to be located on an Indian burial ground, and I believe they actually had to repel a few Indian attacks as they were building it.
So presumably, we can imagine the elevator shafts sink down into the very bodies of the Indians, so to speak, and that's where the blood is coming from. Literal blood of the Indians. And this movie is a movie about, among other things, the blood on which nations are built. Certainly the United States with the genocide of the American Indians. But it's not only that. This is a complete metaphor for what Kubrick is on about, because the elevator doors remain closed. In other words, it's as if it's like a symbol of the repression. We don't want to admit to it, but in spite of our attempting to stay repressed about it, blood will out, murder will out, as Chaucer says in one of his tales. And so the blood comes squeezing out from the side and overwhelms us. And it keeps recurring over and over through the movie, and finally Wendy, when at the very end of the movie, she starts seeing ghosts. She sees the blood. It's the symbol of what we all have in common, and there's lots of symbols in here of what all humans have in common.
42 shows up in other places. Wendy and Danny watch the summer of 42 on a hotel television, and there are a number of other little references to that number. And it's within a larger context that Kubrick uses involving numbers in The Shining, and they're all multiples of 7. The hotel was built in 1907. The party in which Jack is pictured at the end of the film occurs in 1921, in July, the 7th month of the year. These multiples of 7, I think, also reflect the fact that Kubrick was aware of the importance of Thomas Mann's novel of 1924, The Magic Mountain, which similarly concerns a sanitarium, though not a hotel, high up in the mountains. And Mann uses the number 7 there as a symbol of the sort of dangerous fate that seems to have been stalking Europe lately. And in the novel Lolita, Nabokov uses the number 42 as a symbol of fate and Humbert's paranoia, the idea that he's constantly being tracked and that his life is doomed. And even though Kubrick in his film of Lolita only uses the number once, interestingly enough on a hotel room door, I think at some level of consciousness Kubrick was always also drawing from Nabokov's use of that particular number as a symbol of danger and malevolence and disaster.
The opening sound is from the great funeral mass Dies Irae, which is the Day of Judgment, which announces this is going to be a funeral. This is going to be about a judgment on the human race. It's about the past. But I think I remembered that my impression from the opening scene, in which that astonishing helicopter shot gives you a totally creepy feeling. You're looking at great, beautiful nature, but you know you're in a following something. You're like flying along on top of this little tiny insignificant car. It's the ultimate point of view shot without telling you who the point of view is. If you want to stop and think about it, you think this is a helicopter shot. But for the general audience, all you know is that you are like a ghost, you are like an angel, you are like something that flies with supernatural abilities across the landscape of the planet. And the soundtrack had that skittering, I can't imitate it, but that skittering music that sounded to me, and I was conscious of this the first time I saw the movie, like the thousands of voices from the past, the cloud of witness, as the phrase is in Dorothy Sayre uses the title for some story. The cloud of witness, all the ghosts from the past. And I didn't know, were these the voices of the many crowds of aliens or of ghosts I didn't know what, but already that skittering high music with that follow shot across the lake and then across the car itself. It was the ultimate in spooky, because you had the feeling this car is being followed and it doesn't know it, and we're following it. I mean, I could go on for a long time about the symbolism of that with regard to what The Shining really is. And The Shining, as we come to understand it, is seeing through all the layers of history and the horrors of history, even autobiographically, in that scene where Grady and Jack talk in the Blood Red men's room, and Grady says, "Your son has a very great talent. I don't think you realize how great it is. He's a very willful boy." And Jack says, "Yes, he is a very willful boy." And
did you know, Mr. Torrance, that your son is attempting to bring an outside party into this situation?
That's Kubrick. And what he's trying to do is bring the audience and humanity into this situation. In this movie, he is trying to get through to us all, the human race in the movie theaters watching this, that we are doing these things but don't see it, that we are committing these horrendous things over and over again and then forgetting it, which is, of course, he represents many times in the movie, by having characters seem to know something and then not know it and forget it.
You chopped your wife and daughter up into little bits.
I don't have any recollection of that at all.
That's like the human race. We commit atrocities and then forget it.
Bill, I'd like you to meet Jack Torrance.
How do you do? Bill, how do you do? Nice to meet you. Pleasure to meet you.
Some people think that, like, not all of the interview is real. Some of it is Jack's imagination or fantasy of what the interview would be like. Like also Bill Watson's clothes change, like his pants change patterns. And it was also weird, he plays Pontius Pilate in Jesus Christ Superstar. Really playing against type and just being this sort of cipher. I mean, in a way, he's kind of Jack's double. Kind of in the same way that Bill Harford has a double in Eyes Wide Shut. You know, he goes to that blonde woman's house whose father just died, and her fiance looks exactly like Tom Cruise. You know, it's the same haircut.
I've always thought that Bill Watson, the little assistant, and by little I mean he's sort of a shrunken figure, to Ullman, who was brought in and sits there looking sort of dour and resentful and quiet, and whose skin color is sort of half, it's not white, it's sort of toward brown. I've always thought that he sort of represents somebody from a subdued race. He seems a little bit diffident. When Ullman says, "Will you go collect their luggage?" he says, "Fine."
Fine.
And as they're given the tour all around the hotel, Bill Watson is always trailing behind as somebody who's going to be a little factotum to go get things. I've always thought he sort of maybe represented, the condition in the dominant, arrogant culture that the Indians had at that time.
He is the silent guardian for the government. Stuart Ullman represents the face of the U.S. government, and that's why Kubrick gave him the toupee that makes him look like John F. Kennedy. And I think he is the guy who's silently watching everything, and CIA, I guess, kind of NSA guy, and he probably represents the real managers of the house, of the Overlook, and Barry Nelson is just the person that's out in front.
He doesn't say a thing. he's the summer caretaker, and he seems to me to have certain correspondences with Wendy. Jack really doesn't work around the hotel. Wendy gets in there and she does all the work.
You do get the feeling that that Jack's going to be doing his work, because he seems a little like leery of Jack. Like, I've been in job interviews, and I've always found that second person they call in is like the person you're actually interviewing for. Who's making the decision, like that silent person that like kind of like squints at you. Yeah, and he sighs when he's asked to move Jack's luggage.
Bill, would you have the Torrances' things brought to their apartments? Fine.
There's a dissolve which fades from a wide shot of the final black and white photo to a close-up of Jack's face, and just for a second there, his hairline fades in to form a Hitler mustache.
I think a lot of things happen right here in this particular hotel over the years, and not all of them was good.
He once said, "How do you get all of that," meaning the Holocaust, into a 2-hour movie? I think he found the Holocaust of such evil magnitude that he just couldn't bring himself to treat it directly, which is why he used the form of a horror film to treat it indirectly.
I believe Kubrick, possibly consciously, has solved a kind of problem that history has, which is that it's very hard for many people to connect emotionally to a gigantic big killing we hear about in the past. People who don't have direct family experience of it themselves may hear the statistic, Hitler, among other things, killed 6 million Jews in his Holocaust. 6 million is a number too big. I mean, Stalin is reputed to have said, you kill one person, it's a murder and a tragedy. You kill 1 million people, it's a statistic. He was talking about a psychological fact. And, Stalin himself, who was, starved about 3 million people in Western Ukraine in the 30s, on purpose. My point is that it may be that Kubrick was conscious of having offered a kind of way to bridge that inability to feel for those gigantic statistics. In that, if you go and see The Shining innocent the first time and are terrified, you're just terrified, and you'll always remember being terrified. And then go back aware of what the symbolism and the general larger pattern meanings of the movie are. Then you can begin to make something of a connection, saying, oh my God, I remember being terrified for the individual little Danny and Wendy here. And that feeling is actually is for people who were symbols of victims of all kinds of horrendous genocides. And of course, his wife has subsequently talked about, how close he came to making his Holocaust movie, The Aryan Papers, but that he got more and more and more depressed and was relieved when he had an excuse not to do it. He used Schindler's List, as saying it's already been done. That struck a bell with me, and I've done a lot of stories as a journalist about people who study, either talk to people who are victims of horrors or study it. And Freud talked about it as the contagion. The depression seeps into you. Kubrick had a wonderful comment about this. Somebody asked him, but isn't it true that your movies are showing us just the horrendous side of humanity? That's awful bleak. And Kubrick said, no, but there's something very positive about it as well. And that is, it shows at the very least that we can get our minds around what that horror is. And Danny from the beginning has his mind all over the problem. He's looking at it. And in a way, Danny's big wheeling back and forth up and down the hallways. Danny is learning that hotel. He's learning all the horrors. He's seeing them. But they're just in the past. And Halloran gave him the secret. He said, remember, Danny, remember what Tony tells him. Remember what Mr. Halloran said. They're just like pictures in a book. They're not real. Now, that's a really important lesson. People who shine, who see through history, understand that the past simply does not exist, except in one place, and that's the present tense instant of the mind, remembering it. That it's a place you could go to somehow. And yet it doesn't exist. And so Halloran tells Danny, you're going to see some horrible things. Apparently, he told him, you're going to see some horrible things, but remember, they're not real. They're like pictures in a book. They no longer exist. That's a key to not getting depressed about it. And that's, you see, this is a movie about what the past, how the past impinges, any past, and about how to get over that, and how not to be a victim of history. If you doubt what I've written about it, just go see the movie. I figured all of this out from just seeing the movie. It's there, it's obvious, and most people who went and saw the movie said, oh my goodness, it is there.
Okay. Yeah, I was, obsessed with The Shining and reading all the online analyses of it, and was particularly a big fan of the Mastermind's lengthy analysis of it. And he had one phrase that kind of stuck in my mind, that the Shining was a film meant to be seen forwards and backwards. And he didn't mean at the same time. He meant that with the mirror form metaphor that's central to the film, that things forwards and backwards happen throughout the film, and that people walk backwards in the film. People talk backwards. If you reverse the film, it has a format similar to 2001. All these kind of things. How at the end of the Shining, he's reduced to a screaming ape, just like in the beginning of 2001, they're screaming apes. But I was talking to my pals at the Spectacle Theater, riffing about experimental ways of showing films, and they were like, well, do you think you could come up with something, to show here? And I was like, sure, what we should do is we should show The Shining forwards and backwards at the same time. Let's not be creative. Let's just actually reverse the film and show it exactly mirrored, superimposed. The first image is of the reflective lake. And the last image is of the inscription on the photograph, in which Jack is frozen for all time. The Overlook Hotel, July 4th Ball, 1921. So those superimpose make it kind of make it seem like a postcard, like an invitation, like come to the July 4th Ball here in Crater Lake. There's a really cool part where, like, the helicopters are following his car, and his name scrolls up in the credits and, like, meets the car right in the same position where the grid of photographs, right in that photograph that he's trapped in. So his car, his name, and his photograph all line up for 1 second. Pretty cool. The interview has it's great while they're talking about, very dryly about all the murders that happened, like, in the superimposition, Jack's running around with an axe going bananas, There's a lot of just great superimpositions of people's faces lining up. Like Jack's like got the death look, and he's staring through Danny's face as Danny's eating a sandwich. And then there's a lot of things. There's a lot of, like, there's some fun jokes, but then there's serious stuff where, like, where the hallucination, the visions that Danny has, you'll see them, like, overlaid on top of other situations. Like the twin girls are overlaid on top of Wendy, which, if you study the film, you see that the twins are associated with Wendy. They're like her, like, visionary counterpart. All the symbols in the movie overlap in the superimposition, backwards forwards superimposition. The murdered twins are overlaid across Jack's face, and it looks like he looks like a clown, and makes like a clown mask. You know, there's blood everywhere, and like blood on his lips, and blood coming out of his eyes, and like, you know, Danny takes a, you know, like Danny has his hands over his face, and it's Jack is looking out from his head, and then he like peeks out, and he sees Grady, and then Grady and Jack continue their conversation into the next scene, which is where he's watching television, and it's like they have this, their lips are like in the TV. Jack and Grady's lips are in the TV, and these masks are formed by the windows. And it's like Danny's envisioning this. Danny's envisioning, you know, the pact between Grady and Jack. Like sneaks into the bedroom, like right through Jack's head, right in between them. And just like that scene that's the scene where Danny is testing his father, like, do you really, you know, like, do you like this place? You're not going to hurt us, are you? Like, Danny kind of knows that his dad has lost it. The last shot is 1921, and the first shot is of the road. Ullman mentions that it was finished in 1921, so it's a way of returning the narrative back to the beginning.
Mr. Allen, what is in room 237?
Nothing. There ain't nothing in room 237. But you ain't got no business going in there anyway. So stay out.
In the sex room, 237, where we see this beautiful sexual temptress who then becomes a rotting body, realistically depicted as a rotting body, the design on the rug shows basically the most, in geometric form with round curves, the act of intercourse itself, one after another, sort of like a picture of down through the generations of what produces life. You go back out in the hallway in the larger society, and the round curves of that very same design have become hexagons, not so nice and round, and a little bit more like the beehive hexagon, but down the whole corridors of history. I think he's got an image of it there. So he's talking about the family of man, both in an individual nuclear family and in the whole course of our genetic history.
Once Danny enters room 237, like that kind of is like the activation of the rest of the movie. Like that's what causes Jack to go insane. Finally, that's what brings Halloran to the hotel. Like the room 237 is sort of this. I mean, I compare it to the mysterious hotel room at the end of 2001, where there's it's this strange place that somehow like transforms the rest of the narrative. The Shining takes place on the top of a mountain in kind of like a, you know, magical, shape-shifting environment. And like travel is traveling out of it. You know, instead of 2001 where you're traveling to something, the point of The Shining is to escape, is to travel out. And room 237 is like is kind of like the escape pod of the hotel.
If you multiply the numbers 2, 3, and 7, you get 42. Now, I admit perhaps I'm grasping at straws there, but it is consistent with a pattern of reference in the film.
Another thing which my film Kubrick's Odyssey really reveals is the carpeting on the floor during the famous Danny scene where he stands up with his Apollo 11 shirt. The patterns in the carpeting exactly match Launchpad 39A. Even the driveway and everything. And if you notice in that shot, the pattern on the rug changes when Danny stands up.
The carpet is reversed, and there's no pathway there anymore. The pathway that the ball took rolling down towards Danny is gone now. It's no longer there because it's reversed, and you get a sense of a closure. Now the hexagon is closed. It's almost like he's been closed in.
Seven years after The Shining had come out, to my surprise, nobody had written, as far as I could tell, about what the major themes of the movie were beyond the delightfully scary immediate story of the family in the hotel itself. And I was actually doing a story somewhere over in Europe, and I was told over the phone that the posters were out for Full Metal Jacket. I asked about the description, and I was told that it had a peace sign right next to the words Born to Kill, and I said, oh my goodness, his next movie is going to be about some of the same themes. Anyway, I thought, my goodness, I had presumed that it would have become obvious. So I thought, what the heck, I'll just see if I can write an article about it, and to give people more fun when they see Full Metal Jacket to know what his last movie was about in larger senses.
I've gotten a lot of flack from people who work for NASA, and I want to tell them that I'm not saying that we didn't go to the moon, and I'm not saying that their technology that they helped build isn't great and awesome and everything. I'm just saying that what we saw was faked, and I know I have it proved with the front screen projection process. As far as what the government has done, I fully expect my taxes to be audited next year, to be honest with you, and I've had visitations, and they're definitely watching me for sure, and they're not too happy with what's going on here, and I think they're probably very worried about the next film, and that one will be the really explosive film.
We were walking along the beach on vacation with some people in Costa Rica. I had this delightful experience. We were walking along with a young couple who were from San Francisco. And it was a long walk. We'd gone through this big, beautiful jungle, and we're coming back on the beach to walk back to where the tent camp was. And we started chatting about Kubrick. I said, oh, Kubrick's great. And the guy said, The Shining it's actually about the American Indians. I said, really? And he said, and he went on talking. And I said, really? And I just couldn't resist just playing dumb for a while he told me the whole thing. I was delighted.
Kubrick just sets up synchronicities. His movies, they create synchronous situations in themselves. There's this man who says, quite a party, isn't it? Why did Kubrick put him there with the split down his head? Why did he put him there? And I was contemplating that. And in comes my son, and he was 9 years old at the time. And he didn't know what I was working on. And he came in, and he began to tell me a story. And he said, I've just thought this up. And his character's head was split open with a chaos bolt. And the character says, talk about a splitting headache. And out of the contents of his head leaps a small person who is his real self, and it goes running off saying in a high squeaky voice, forget this, I'm going home. And yeah, I thought that was really stunning synchronicity. I mean, because you've got all the elements there. You've got the axe, you've got the whole idea of the lightning bolt, the chaos bolt striking the person's head, the splitting headache. You've got Tony's squeaky voice. Yeah, I thought that was quite a synchronicity.
One can always argue that Kubrick had only some or even none of these in mind, but we all know from postmodern film criticism that author intent is only part of the story of any work of art, and those meanings are there regardless of whether the creator of the work was conscious of them.
I think, if you want to know what I think the hotel is so whacked out that I don't have any clue what's going on from the beginning. When you really sit and think about it, I mean, because the whole thing is so whacked out and it's so not put together. It's so, everything is so wildly out of place that the closer you get into looking at things, the more you look at them, it's kind of like, you know, the scene in Eyes Wide Shut where Bill goes, you know, he returns, he retraces his footsteps, and he goes back to the mansion where he was, and he's told you know, to stop your inquiries, they will serve you no purpose. It's almost like it gets to that with The Shining. The more you magnify things, the more you look at them, the less purpose it serves, because it's so out of whack. None of it makes sense from the beginning.
There must be a lot of stuff in there that nobody has yet seen, and so people ought to keep watching it.
But why would he make the movie so complicated?
Yeah, I mean, why did Joyce write Finnegan's Wake? I mean, it's a way of like opening doors from like a hermetically sealed reality into possibilities. It's also a way of trapping someone like me, like who goes looking for clues and like keeps finding them, and next thing you know, you're like, man, I've been trapped in this hotel forever. Like, I'm dreaming about this place. You know, I'm like Jack. I'm like all work and no play, or the other way around. It doesn't really matter. Like, you're like in this loop. But you know, there are escape routes. Like like I think he puts escape routes into this maze, into this trap. There are ways out of it. I mean, Danny finds a way out of it. You know, by retracing the steps, by going backwards and forwards. Once you start, you know, studying, you know, synchronicity and symbolism, then like suddenly, like you notice in your own life, like things start popping out, like, things that you hadn't noticed before. I mean, like your point of view is being altered by your study, and you know, it's quantum physics, you know, like the act of observing like affects the thing observed.
Hi, Lloyd.
Yeah. I mean, it gets weird because like I you know, as I've been obsessing over this thing, I've like, you know, I've been home, like I've been out of work for a while, like. I have a small son. You know, we're thinking of moving out to like somewhere isolated. I mean, things get strange. You know, like I just saw like wow, my life has actually become The Shining. You know,